Okay. Okay. So what's the anger mask? What's the style these guys have? Leaker. Yes, they're coming in sideways. The little cutting comments. It's under the surface, right? You guys got it. Okay. So Graham, are we going to discussion time, or are we going to launch right into teaching? Okay. If you can load up, he's way ahead of me. Okay, so today we've been talking about anger. Today we're going to talk about what's under the surface. We use the iceberg analogy. And I'm an engineer, rocket scientist, and I like to understand stuff, but this fuzzy relational stuff sometimes is a little difficult to figure out. So Athena and I have had the honor and privilege of learning a lot of really great marriage material and principles, and we've used that to start our ministry, Relate 2020, and God's given us opportunity to take that around the world. And this last week we had a workshop that we did that was attended by people from 4 continents. So thank God for that. Okay. Did you notice in the video the cat back there playing with the knife, on the counter? Maybe the cat is the spewer, right? Okay. This study on anger has been really, really helpful to me, and I'll ask Athena to come up. We've been going through it with Lori, Kate, and Cody, and they're helping us gain further insights. And I'm kind of getting more in touch with my anger. I was one of these guys. I identify as a leaker, and but before that, I didn't think I had much anger. I just call it frustration or something else. Just minimize it, and I probably would have written it off, but now I'm coming more in touch with it. But I had a situation a couple weeks ago where I did a little bit more than leak. There was a situation at work, where I'd been trying to get a specific desk chair for my desk, and the director is telling me, no, that's a special order thing. We can't do that unless you have, HR, health and safety tell you that you need it, And so I'd kind of written it off. But then I found the chair I liked in one of the classified rooms and got permission to take it. The only problem was there was a few parts broken on it, the armrests and the lift and so on. And so I got it back to my desk and I sent a little email to our admin saying, hey, could we get authorization to get the parts for this thing, the armrests and the chair lift thing, and it's only $70, and here's a link to the chair. The chair's worth like $1,700 if you're going to buy it new. It seems worth it to do that, and so I sent off this email to the admin for my director 3 levels up, and I get this email back, first thing in the morning saying, well, we need a doctor's note for any expensive items. And I went through the roof. Doctor's note, what do you mean? It's just $70, and I tried my email, choice words like petty and you're not caring for your employees and stuff like that. And then I did what you're never supposed to do with your angry emails. I hit the send button. Boom. Oh! So after that, I came downstairs and I was describing, Athena could tell right away something was wrong. And so I was describing to her, what had happened, and I'll let her tell her side of that.
So he sat down and he said, I'm angry. And I'm like, yes, he's in touch with that emotion. Because he never says that. So I'm like, well, what happened? What going on? So he told me what happened. And he was, summarized it. And I'm like, wow, I could see why you're angry. Maybe you could have said a little something like, I'm sure you care for the employees at Northrop Grumman, and in this situation, I'm not sure I'm being looked after. Somehow soften, somehow be relational. And so he went upstairs.
And I rewrote the email. And I started off with, let me try this again. And it was a much more sheepish email that went out. And I got a reply right back. Thankfully, the admin had intercepted it before it got to the director. And it turned out that she had misunderstood. She thought I was asking for the chair, the $1,700 chair, not the $70 parts. And it all worked out in the end. But I did, learn a lot about myself. But, what really struck me about that was Athena's response. When I was honest about my anger, she didn't pull away. She drew in closer. And she said, "Oh, I want to be close to you because you're sharing what's going on in your emotional world." And it really drew us together. And I think that's a possibility for all of us. And that's all for Athena. So today I want to talk about that emotional side of our relationship and how to identify what's under the anger. So maybe you can bring some healing to those hurts. So I'm going to show you something that helps identify those emotional reactions and put words to it. And then I'll show you a simple method to communicate, some of the underlying emotions more specifically. But let's see if I can figure out the clicker or get it to work. On button. Yes. There we go. Okay, we already did the dinner prayer. You guys like that? The other way. Okay, I get you. Okay, so eyesight. Glasses or no glasses? Okay. So our goal for today is to understand our angry reactions and what's under the anger. So the main thing I want you to learn is that your spouse's overreactions, like mine, are not just something to be endured, but a clue to a hidden emotional wound that maybe you can bring a little bit of healing to if we respond in the right way, like Athena did with me. So we all react in different ways when our spouses are upset. How do you react? Are you one that runs away fast as you get? I'm out of here. Are you the one who's just kind of confused about the whole thing? How do I deal with this? What do I do? What do you want me to do? Or are you one to press in, like Athena did? And I'm here to tell you that third option is possible for all of us. Those angry reactions that we're so afraid of are an opportunity for us to grow closer, for us to understand what's under the surface with each one of us. So how do we do that? First, we need to recognize our reactions. And I'll show you this. I did show this to some of you. Might be familiar with this from a previous teaching, but I'll show it to you. It's worth going over again because it really is relevant here. We all react to our anger in different ways. Something hits our heart, and it makes us, we think anger makes us powerful or in control, but really it's the opposite. Really, we're being controlled by our anger. So this little model is really helpful in understanding. We get hit with an emotional wound. Something happens, something triggers us, causes us pain. And for most of us, the things that we're most triggered by are things that go way back to our childhood. One of the counselors we talked to said that 80% of our emotional wounds go back to before age 9, and 90% of them are before age 20. So they've been there a long time. So what happens when we're children? We have these emotional wounds. It hits our heart. It creates pain. And then our brains do something called pattern recognition. And each time we feel that same thing, that arrow shaft goes a little longer, until as adults we've got all these arrow shafts sticking out of our heart up here. And all needs to happen is somebody just comes by and brushes the feathers, and you get this amplified reaction all the way back to that old pain. You know what I'm talking about? So the good news out of this is when you see an overreaction in your spouse, chances are it's not your fault. Chances are they're reacting to something that was there way before you came along. You may be responsible for that brushing of the feather, the trigger, but not for the entire sequence of pain in their lives. So it becomes a clue. It becomes a clue that you can look a little deeper. If you can look a little deeper, you might be able to understand your spouse's emotional wound and that pain and what you can do to bring healing to it. It could be rejection, abandonment, being overwhelmed in a new culture. Okay, that's just my list. But we all have ours. And that pattern recognition will be the clue that will lead us all the way back to that initial reaction. So with those arrows, those pains in our life, it creates an atmosphere of fear as we try to protect ourselves from that little brush of those pains. And when it gets brushed, we have this reaction. Now we react in one of four ways. Some of us withdraw. We go into our own little private little cave and we hide out and we pull back and get quiet. Others go in attack mode, and that's best defense is a good offense, right? We go into attack mode. So which of those three anger masks does that sound like? Yeah, that's the spewer, and withdrawal is what? That's the stuffer, right? Okay, so it's going inward versus outward. Then there's two other ones. There's one is control. This is a person that tries to control the environment to make it safe for themselves. They try to control the environment and everyone in it. And then the fourth one is overworking. People that kind of bury themselves in their work, go off and get busy with some unrelated task, try to, just get away that way. And the two on the bottom and the right there, those are inward reactions. The other two are outward reactions. But we all have them. Can you identify with this? Maybe have your style? Mine is overwork. I'll go bury myself in something else. I'll go out in the garage or just go to work or whatever. And if that doesn't work, then I go into withdrawal mode. Both of those are internal kinds of reactions. So note the acronym here. Withdraw, attack, control, overwork. Wacko. We go wacko, right? Okay, hopefully you can remember that. So how do we remove the arrows? How do we bring healing to the hurt? We need to ask open-ended questions. Like, what was going on back there? Like Athena did with me. What were you feeling? And don't settle for frustrated or angry or something like that, or external accusations. Go deeper. No, what was it you're feeling? I really want to know what was in your heart right there. Were you feeling betrayed? Were you feeling attacked? What was it? And go down, and then if you want to go even deeper, you can ask, have you ever felt that before? Tell me about your earliest memory of that particular feeling. It might surprise you how it goes all the way back. Here's the powerful thing. If you can identify the reaction as coming from a previous pain, you can respond with compassion instead of reacting defensively. It's much easier to see that other person as a hurting little boy, a scared little girl, someone that needs a bit of comfort. And then it's much easier for us with that mindset to go into a healing mode. So let's move on from here. And then those lies can be healed. Okay, one of the things to note about anger, like Chip Ingram says, anger is just the visible tip of the iceberg. It's just what you see. So if we try to chip away at that visible tip, it's like knocking chunks off the top of an iceberg. What's that going to do? The whole iceberg is just going to float up a little higher. Different things are going to surface, and you're going to end up with that much more to deal with, right? But what if we could go deeper and find out what's underneath it? And in the book, Chip says below the surface are like unmet needs, unmet expectations, insecurities, and Lori Kate will go through that in future weeks. But today we're going to go with emotions, fears, and core needs. And like the scriptures say there in Proverbs 24, the purpose of a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. If you want to be that man or woman of understanding and draw it out, you can see those deep purposes, those deep things in the other person's heart. So how do we do that? Okay, first of all, we're going to go deep, and they're in level of depth here, and these are related to 7 levels of intimacy by I forget the author's name. Anyways, but these are some of the things that he goes into. Now, either party can start that honest conversation about the submerged start stuff, but both parties need to be willing to go there. Both, you need to have buy-in on both sides. The question is, how deep do you want to go? How deep do you want to go with this? But the deeper you go, the closer you get, the more intimate your relationship gets. So let's press in. Let's unpack this a little bit, and we're going to go through. I'm going to give you a little tool here. It's called an emotional word list, and it's in your packet there on the table there. And this is a little different format than what you have there, but there's a list of emotional words there. And for most of us, if you ask what's under the surface, we really have no idea. You know, we might say angry or frustrated or whatever, but those nuanced words, we really don't, either we don't have the emotional language for it, or, you know, we're just too angry to think straight. So pulling out the emotional word list can be very helpful to just scan through it, and it's all categorized there. You know, you can think, let's do this. Can you think of a time that you were really, really angry? I'll give you a minute just to think. Just, you know, it might be at your spouse, your boss, or whatever, kids or whatever, but can you think of a time that you were really angry? I didn't give you much time to think, but maybe you have one. What was the emotion under it? With that event in mind, can you scan through that list, you know, find the right category, and then drill down a little deeper? Shine a light down into your heart so you can see a little deeper where that was coming from. You know, and then that gives us, you know, if you find the match, then that gives you a starting point for a discussion with your spouse about it. You know, I think I was really blank when that happened. So, you know, finding the right word for the anger shrinks it incredibly. I was talking with one of the guys in here last week, and he said, for me, just identifying the emotion under it, that is almost as good as resolving it for me, because then I know what it's about. It's like taking this big cloud of, you know, emotions over your head and shrinking it down to the glass of water on the table. You can deal with that. You have something to focus on. So when you have that understanding, you know, how do you talk about it with your spouse? You know, here's a good response. You know, let's say you're angry at your spouse. See, I feel angry when you. So you're owning your own feelings, and you're tying it to something your spouse did. You know, that's good. It's talking about your anger instead of going wacko on them. You know, withdrawing, attacking, controlling, or overworking. It's starting a conversation, but let me suggest there's something better. I feel hurt when you. So that's getting a little bit more vulnerable. You see, that's saying that there's an emotional hurt there. And that's starting to go deeper. But I think there's an even better one than that, the best one. You know, I feel this specific emotion off that list when you. So now you're adding to the vulnerability, you're adding some understanding, you're adding some clarity to it. And, you know, let me ask you, which one of those three responses do you think is going to elicit more compassion? Yeah, of course, you know, when we're vulnerable, right? So, you know, so to go deeper, then you can ask again, you know, when did you feel that before? Tell me, was there a memory before that? Maybe something in your childhood? Let me tell you that, you know, if you can do that, the vulnerability will make you very, very attractive. Isn't that right, ladies? Yeah. You know, the ladies oftentimes, well, finally, he's showing a little bit of emotion. Finally, I'm seeing underneath the surface. He's not just trying to fix things. He's showing me where he's hurt me and where he's needy. So, and when you're the one listening, don't immediately start jumping in trying to fix it. just feel it with them for a second. Just express care. I'm so sorry you went through that. That really sounds terrible. Just be there with them. And, you can get to the healing part later, but you'll be surprised how much healing comes just from listening well. And for now, just listen, just understand, and pray. Let's take that hurt to Jesus. Let's ask Jesus to surround that hurt, because Jesus can be like that ocean surrounding that iceberg. He can melt it. He can bring healing to it in ways that we never could. He can give answers to it in ways that we might not be able to come up with. You don't have to have all the answers for your spouse's troubles. You don't have to have the answers for their pains. But you can be there for them. You can be understanding. You can be caring. So that's really deep. But we can go even deeper. Because under those emotions are fears and insecurities. We all have these fears that spring from our emotional pain because, those we're trying to protect something. We have what if questions circling in our head, and I put a couple of them up here on the board. They circle in our heads like a tornado, and we don't have answers for them, so we just keep on going, and it becomes a tornado of anxiety in our head. So to go even deeper, you can ask for what's the fear under that emotion, that specific emotion that you shared. And they might need to take some time to think. Might be feeling unprotected. I feel like I'm stuck in this unsafe situation, or I feel rejected, like I don't really matter to that boss at work, I feel devalued. My opinion just doesn't matter to you or to others. Or this is getting really vulnerable. I feel weak. I feel like, I'm facing potential failure and I'm scared about failing. That's getting really vulnerable. That's drawing you really close when you can share those kinds of things going to into the fears. But believe it or not, there's something even deeper than that. And those are the legitimate needs that we all have. And we'll categorize them into four areas. We all have these four same basic needs. It's all common to all humanity. Maslow's hierarchy goes through these, and it's in a lot of different places. But we have first and foremost, we have a need for safety. We need to have inner peace to know that we are secure from outside threats and sometimes from inside threats. Some of our worst, insecurities are because we're attacking ourselves and we're accusing ourselves of stuff. So we need to have a sense of safety. Secondly, we need to have a sense of belonging. We need to feel loved, connected, cared about, part of a community that I matter to you, and I'm loved, I'm cared for. And third is a sense of significance, that my life matters. That I have your respect because my life makes a difference in this family. My life makes a difference. My decisions, my words, it all makes a difference. And the fourth thing is sufficiency, that I have what it takes to make that difference. And, ladies, one of the things guys Google all the time is, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes to be a good husband? Do I have what it takes to be a good father? Do I have what it takes to be a good employee at work? We're all always measured by our performance. And so, when we can get down and unpack those questions in your husband's mind, you can address and maybe melt some of those deepest heart needs that they have by giving them encouragement along those same lines. Okay, so in your warmth might be just what they need to melt that iceberg. But even if you don't go through this process with your spouse, you can go through this same process with God. You can, take that emotional word list home in your quiet time and say, I'm just really struggling with my boss. I'm just really struggling with my kids. I'm so upset. What is it that I feel? Go through the list. Identify it. What is it I'm afraid of? Ask for the what if question. What is the what if question? And then go down deep to which one of those 4 core needs, and have that conversation with God. Have that conversation with the living God who knows you and knows all about you. Tell him. He already knows it. That's what David did. And that's what a lot of the Psalms are about, is David having that very same conversation with God. And you see him starting off in a psalm with, I'm so upset about my enemies. And then at the end, he's feeling peace. And I have an example of, how I processed some of that with God a few years back. I want to throw in something here. Just this morning, I was in my quiet time. I was asking God, do you have anything special for today for me? And I was led to read. I've been struggling with sleep. I'm not getting enough sleep, and I landed in Psalm 4, and God kind of brought my attention to verse 4, which is something that we're taught. It's all about anger. Have you heard the expression, don't go to bed with your anger? Did you know that that's not scriptural? Maybe it's a good principle, but it's not scriptural. Psalm 4:4 says, be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your heart on your beds and be silent. There's sometimes we treat it as if this is deadline. I gotta, I'm angry with you, and we gotta work it out before we go to bed, because if I don't, it's gonna turn into bitterness tomorrow. And Scripture says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. We gotta work this out, and you're both exhausted, and you're both angry. You're not gonna work it out before bedtime, and you're just gonna end up frustrated. Sometimes we just need to ponder and go to bed silent. And go to bed with a prayer. The Psalm 4:4 says, be angry and do not sin. That's the one that's quoted in Ephesians 4:26, where it says, be angry, don't sin, and don't let the sun go down on your anger, right? It's quoting this verse. And what this verse says is, ponder on your own hearts, on your beds, and be silent. And the verse before it says, the Lord hears when I call to him. The verse after it says, put your trust in the Lord. So there's sometimes you're not going to be able to work it out with your spouse, and you just need to go to bed offering it to the Lord. Say, God, I'm just upset with her right now, or him right now, but I'm going to put it in your hands, and I'm going to trust that you have an answer that I haven't thought of yet. And what about that passage in Ephesians 4? Don't let the sun go down on your anger. If you take that literally, that means it's not bedtime; it's sunset. How many of you go to bed at sunset? It's more referring to a passage of time. Sunset was the end of the day for a Hebrew. And it's just saying, don't let the anger linger in your heart for a long time. And a day is a good way to, to put a limit on it. It will turn into bitterness if you let it go down. Yeah. If you applied it literally, let's say you're angry at President Trump or something, should you call him up at 11 p.m. and saying, I'm really angry about blah, 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 blah. Or Newsom, let's get politically correct here. Of course not. It's not just applicable to wives and husband-wife relationships. It's, don't let anger simmer in your hearts for a long time against anybody. And this is how we deal with it. So, I'll share a little. You guys like poetry? Will you like my poetry? I'm feeling insecure. No. I had a time like 7 or 8 years ago where Athena had said something in the evening, I forget what we're struggling. I don't even remember what it was, but I remember being really upset and really, really hurt. And so hurt that, I knew I shouldn't say anything. And so we went to bed with that. And, I had this dream. And in this dream, I just offered it to the Lord before I went to sleep. And in this dream, I was caught in a canyon, and I could hear a flash flood coming. And the kind of dreams where your feet are kind of stuck and you can't run. And, it was one of those dreams. And I woke up at midnight. And it was midnight, December 21st, the longest night of the year, right? And I woke up out of this dream, and I knew somehow it was an answer to the Lord for me. So I got up out of bed, I went into the other room, and I started writing. And I wrote this poem. I call it Flash Flood. And see if you can see, what my pain was, what my emotional pain was, what the fear was, what the core need was, and see if you can relate to this. You're not the man you should be. Words coming most unkind. An anger flash flood rises in the canyons of my mind. How did my dark accuser find lips of one so close to tear my soul asunder from here within my house? The little boy within me can't cry himself to sleep. Where can I find a refuge from pains that run so deep? The flash flood growing closer, my feet are trapped in mud. Despair, my dark companion, forbids the higher ground. Anger, like a torrent, now close to overwhelm, destroying thoughtful reason, like boulders thrown from hell. Where can I find a refuge? These canyon walls too high. An eagle soars above me. Oh, lift me up, I cry. Cry out for help beyond me. This battle I can't fight. To wound one dear and lovely would only darken night. Come now, come near. O Jesus, my Savior's voice I hear. This way, my gentle children, a narrow way appears. Through pathways in the shadow, I will fear no ill. One walks now here before me, cruel words his blood did spill. He knows safe paths of silence. Like his, words must be kind. I give my rights to Jesus, and rage torrents pass behind. He calls me treasured child again, and tells me who I am. Truth fills my inward mind. Remember and be firm. And now upon this higher ground, so lifted from the dust, find him alone as judge again. My case to him entrust. If crosses must be carried, he will supply my strength. I am the man I should be. My anger he has quenched. So that's actually me in that canyon there. It's a picture of me. So what was the emotion do you think I was feeling? Inadequate. Yeah, inadequate. That nailed it. So what, mistreated maybe, berated, shamed. What fears was I dealing with? What if I'm not enough? What if I'm not sufficient? Yeah, that's getting down to the deeper level too. What else? Rejected. Yeah, I was feeling a bit rejected. I wasn't good enough for Athena. Mm-hmm. Daniel? Hmm? Not good enough? Yeah. Hmm? Abandoned. Yes. Those are all things, emotional words that I was feeling. Yes. One of the fears I was feeling is I was afraid of myself, what I might say, that my response would hurt Athena. That was, I didn't want to respond to her in a way that would hurt her. And so what was the core need? I think Dana already said here, it was sufficiency. I didn't feel enough. I didn't measure up as a man within my home. So let's go back to discussion time now. I'm going to give you guys a chance to discuss maybe that issue that you thought of. There's some discussion times, questions on your table there. There's the first question talks about your reaction style. Which style of wacko are you? And then, for those of you who want to share, and this is not mandatory, but if you want to share a little bit with your table about your anger story and maybe some of the emotions underneath it, the fears underneath it, the core needs, that would require incredible courage. But, if you're up to sharing that around your table, it will draw you guys much, much closer together. This kind of intimacy, this kind of vulnerability always does. So, and then, but please let me ask you, if there's an anger issue with your spouse, don't share it without permission from your spouse, okay? We want to honor one another here. And if you're a listener, don't take up an offense about the issue, and focus on what they're upset about. That's what we usually do. Oh yeah, Newsom and Trump and whatever, whatever. We take up the offense, and then it becomes about the offense, and we miss the opportunity to hear about the deeper pain. Rather, we don't want to fan the flame of anger here. Rather, we want to provide a safe environment with gentleness, to have them identify their deeper needs and deeper emotions. And if nobody has a story to share around your table, that's fine too. Just talk about the first question and take the discussion wherever it goes. But I'll leave it up to you guys. Okay, that's it for me. Let me first pray for our discussion time. Heavenly Father, as you know us more completely than we do, would you reveal what you know about us? Would you give us eyes to see into our hearts like you see? Would you give us courage to share what's deep inside with those that we trust the most? And give us the ability to trust even more in response? And Jesus, for those things that are so deep that we can't really share with anybody, would you give us that opportunity, that place to share it with you, and to go deep with you and find a deeper connection, knowing that you're always there, you're always caring. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.